Excellent. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. My name is Nancy Watt. I own a creative agency out of Toronto, and I am delighted to be back working with, engaged with, and invested in the work of Women in Cloud. I want to welcome you. This is a fantastic workshop. Welcome to Mind Your Mindset, practicing self-awareness and identifying shadow behaviors. You know, I said to Chaitra that when we were selected to do this workshop, this particular workshop, I feel like I won the lottery, because one of the things that I admire and experience in being an entrepreneur is the necessary courage and vulnerability, which are often synonymous, that it takes to go forth. There are lots of things that come up and create lots of obstacles. And it takes that courage to show up and be able to withstand that. And with shadow behaviors, with what we are talking about today, it is not necessarily what shows up, but who shows up. Who shows up. And we have such a great panel here to share with us. And as you know, as you've been doing for 3 days, feel free to interact. I love that the chat, you know what to do, ask questions, engage, and this time is going to fly. This time is going to fly. Thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Introductions. Okay, our first speaker I'm going to introduce all the panelists. And as a licensed psychologist, Dr. Renee Saint-Jacques, who leads the coaching practice at Lions and Tigers. And she brings her unique blend of human behavior expertise and business technology experience. Her nearly 2 decades in FDE and consulting roles in tech marketing give her the senior level perspective to understand the work issues that her clients face daily. While her extensive doctoral training in psychology offers her the intuition and the expertise to support her clients' relational and emotional intelligence needs beyond the office. Dr. Renee Saint-Jacques believes emotional intelligence can change the world, and she desires to equip people with greater mental, emotional, and relational help to attain the highest level of home and work success, and can transform their life into a legacy and this world into a kinder, healthier place. I love that, Renee. I love transform their life into a legacy. Welcome, welcome here.
Thank you.
Kristen Miller is in the house, and she known to many of you. She's a seasoned entrepreneur who has founded 4 successful companies in the home improvement and retail industry, and she's a pioneer of leveraging technology to optimize business processes and strategies to accelerate growth. She is a leader within the women in technology community and is a board member for the Beyond Project and as an advisor to Women in Cloud. She's an in-demand speaker on retail innovation and entrepreneurship for Techstars Startup, WIC Seattle, and Cloud Innovator. At Stylize, her company, Kristen's mission is to provide a platform for retailers that revolutionizes the omni-channel shopping experience. And Stylize's platform synthesizes the elements of the in-store experience previously missing from the virtual and digital space, refining and advancing the online customer journey of the future. And the future is right now. I know just how busy you are. Kristen, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
And we have Pruitt, Michelle Pruitt. Everyone knows and loves her as Pruitt. She is the Senior Director with the Customer Advisory Industries for SAP. She is instrumental in guiding Fortune 500 and SMBs to accelerate their digital transformation and modernize their business while bringing cloud and AI, machine learning, and predictive analytics to the forefront. Her passion for technology and deep commitment to women in technology, empathetic leadership, and customer advocacy has ignited workplaces to increase productivity and profitability while building a success story that fosters business transformation and a competitive edge. Her accomplishments as a trained mediator, certified life coach, and storyteller have cultivated broad innovation with top leaders, helping them tap into their unrealized potential and impact by connecting technology, people, and situational environments. Look at all of you in the house. Welcome, Pruitt. Welcome, welcome. Okay, let's get started. There's so much information to cover, and what I love is your investment in bringing your personal experience in your both your mindset and identifying shadow behaviors. So let's start with you, Dr. St. Jacques. Let's start with Renee. This session is focused on mindset and shadow behaviors. Let's start with opening. What is mindset? How is it important? And how can we use it for the most benefit?
Thank you, Nancy. It is a true honor to be back for the second year in a row for Women in Cloud. I said last year, and I'll say it again, that we cannot move from inspiration to action after these 3 days without addressing the psychological and relational dynamics and barriers that might be holding us back. For me, when I coach other leaders, I see that there are two things that hold us back. It's either ourselves, like imposter syndrome and the mindsets that we have about ourselves, or the relationships, in that our work is only as good as our skill of working with other people. And so today, I really want to emphasize the mindset and the emotional intelligence, this ability to perceive and understand and manage our emotions, as well as judiciously and empathetically be in relationships. That combination allows us to reach our highest potential as leaders. Nancy?
Sorry, so sorry. I love that, Renee. I love how you explain that the barometer of our success is the quality of our relationships with others. So interesting. So shadow behaviors are defined and perceived in different ways. Share your thoughts on shadow behaviors.
Yes. So shadow behavior is a famous term that was coined by a renowned Carl Jung. It's a psychoanalyst that really shaped this work. And so when I think about shadow behavior, I mean, traditionally it's meant to really signal areas of suppression, areas that we've repressed in our memories, maybe areas of trauma or areas where we are really operating out of our dark side. And so, but the purpose of our time today is really to help equip everybody with really practical skills on how they can grow in their leadership style, in their ability to monitor their own emotions and be more effective with other people. So to me, the way I would actually define shadow behavior would be really any times that we are operating where we're triggered, where we are acting small or insecure, or where we're having that negative mindset that's really hindering us from our potential.
So interesting. Christian, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. And I tend to think of shadow behavior as behavior that emerges from our blind spots. Mm-hmm. So, as Renee said, aspects of ourselves that we're not consciously aware of that impact our emotional state and our behaviors. So then I think of shadow work as really making these blind spots visible. The good news is that our shadows often connected to some of our greatest strengths. So by doing this work, we really can continue to develop the best aspects of ourselves. I think a great example of this is illustrated with traditional archetypes. So for example, you have an archetype that's the queen or the king at the top of a triangle pyramid. And that's what we aspire to be. We aspire to live in that, queen state or king state. But the bottom two corners of that triangle are really the shadows. So you see the tyrant and the weakling. So when we're operating in our blind spot, we can default to those two archetypes. Whereas when we learn to work through this to optimize, to be out of our shadow, then we're spending more time in the state of king and queen, which is what we all want to do.
So interesting. I love that. I love that. The archetypes make so much sense, and they don't call them blind spots for nothing, right? Pruitt, please weigh in here. We'd love to hear you.
Yeah. So first off, I completely agree with Renee and Kristen. So I think of shadow behaviors in that, depending on who you ask, they can be defined in different ways, different depths. how I think about it again with today's session, it's referring to an awareness of how and why we're reacting to a particular event and our person, right? And how and why that is serving us either positively or negatively. And we tend to lead with different behaviors and different mindsets when we're less aware of our environment and less aware of our audience. We're feeling tired, we're feeling dismissed, overwhelmed, triggered, as you heard Renee say. So I would say it isn't necessarily about right or wrong, but an awareness of where and why we may not present our best selves, and those shadow behaviors then dominate. So that awareness allows us to reframe. And I would say that those then shadow behavior, right, when we're aware of them, we're able to conduct that reframe and we're able to present our optimum self.
So interesting. So what does this look like? Kristen, can you share personal experience about how shadow behavior showed up and the impact that that had and how you responded?
Oh, yes, Nancy, I have lots of experience with living in my shadow. I would say I spent a lot of my early career and truly the decade between 25 to 35 operating in my shadow. And I was constantly frustrated because I knew when I felt that I was capable of doing big things or at least taking bigger risks, but I felt blocked all the time by my own inability to fully take action and show up. I always played it safe. I felt good when I perceived I was, the smartest person in the room. So I wasn't maybe surrounding myself with the right people who could help me grow. And I was constantly apologizing for everything. So it's almost like every email I wrote started with my apologies, and I was just inventing reasons to apologize. And so it got to the point where I really felt like I was apologizing for my own existence. And I was vacillating between that weakling feeling, apologizing for everything, in the tyrant, which was turned on myself. I was angry with myself and frustrated with myself all the time. And as a result, I often got involved with businesses or started businesses that didn't require that I grew out of this place. And so thankfully, around the age of 35, I met some amazing people and cultivated a group of mentors around me who helped me start to identify these behaviors and helped me see that I was really depowering myself and taking opportunities off the table with these behaviors. And so in the course of going through that journey, I founded Stylize, which has also been a great teacher for me because it's been really challenging and it's given me the opportunity to flex the muscle, if you will, of constantly working on these behaviors. So I feel really fortunate that I've had the opportunity to live in the shadow a lot and identify it. And then now, having gone full circle, I feel more equipped to handle the times when I slip right back into it.
Fascinating. Pruitt, what about you? Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, so where Kristen talks about apologizing, I refer to this as sorryitis, and I definitely can relate. If we can jump back actually 2 slides, I want to go over shadow behaviors as I was introduced to it. So for me, I felt that I was getting in my own way. And I was introduced to shadow behaviors through a professional coach that I was working with. And it was to eliminate that feeling of like fighting against myself. I wanted to develop my professional brand. I wanted to improve my engagement and my influence. And how I would sum that up is I wanted to professionally be a grown-up because I didn't feel that I was. So I took what was called the Print Survey by the Paul Harvey Group. And it highlighted, as you can see here, this is some of my actual results. It highlighted my best self behaviors and then my shadow self behaviors. And if I'm honest with myself, which I am being today and with you, these are really accurate. Now, what I didn't understand is that shadow behaviors could also be a positive if you're aware of them. So, for example, my desire to be a good team player can sometimes lead me to overcommit. I have a very strong desire to make progress and to move fast. However, that can also lead me to miss details and to appear a bit rushed to some of my colleagues. And so when I think of shadow behaviors, right, these are connected to our superpowers, and especially where you see where you are more strongly indexed. So again, if you look at this slide and you look at my shadow behavior of avoiding conflict, well, this becomes my superpower because it drives my desire to validate contributions of others, right? To work towards those mutually beneficial compromises. So much so that I even went through mediation training, right? Because everything we do, in my opinion, is a negotiation, a mediation. And then as a team player, I wanted to appreciate and yet also diffuse negative situations. And so when I take the step back and I look at this slide that you're seeing with my best self behaviors and shadow behaviors, this is a personal recipe. This recipe creates my superpower that allows me to engage in and then support very candid conversations, creating an environment of conscious engagement. So I'm very passionate about this topic, as you can tell.
So interesting. I love how there is such polarity in the strength and how you're able to use it as a superpower. I'd love to know how can you identify really when you're not being authentic, your authentic self, and the shadow behaviors are dominating the situation, and so then how do you remain true to your professional brand, Kristen?
For me, the easiest way to identify these moments is through my emotional state. So often it's anger and frustration that are two common triggers for me, that suggest I should pause and take a deeper look at what's actually causing those emotions. Not that they're not valid emotions, and in many cases they are, but they can often be a leading indicator for me that I am in my blind spot.
So interesting. Thank you. I'm just going to stay with Pruitt one more because we're going to get a whole workshop from Renee. Thank you, Renee. And I can hardly wait to hear from you. Pruitt, can you weigh in on that too? How do you know when they're showing up?
Yeah, what Kristen said about blind spot is so true. And if we can bring up the slides again, I'm going to share some of the results from my own print assessment showing my triggers. And there we go. Yeah. So, again, we have this tendency to lean towards a shadow behavior when we're not in our best physical and emotional state. We're in a version of fight or flight. And so knowing our triggers and knowing some of the responses, it can help us step back and create a sense of objectivity. So when you look here at this slide, you're going to see, again, some of the techniques that I use, knowing what my shadow behaviors are. So for example, if I'm going to go into a meeting and I know that it's a challenging situation, a challenging conversation that's on the agenda, I make a conscious decision to assume positive intent and then look for the common ground to build upon. And that common ground might just be a tiny sliver, right? Like a 1% type of deal, but it still is common ground to build upon. I also then consider the end goal and ask if the behaviors, mine and the behaviors of others, are they serving me and are they serving us and are they serving the project that we're working on? If my behaviors are aligned with my values and the ultimate goal of the project, great. If they're not, I need to reframe and I need to change the way that I'm coming forward. I also readily apologize when it's called for, right? It's not the sorry-itis. And then recognize and validate the opinions and feelings of others, even if they do not agree, right? If we look at how all of us operate, most of us want to be seen and heard. It's not about the agreement. So if you can validate, recognize the people at the table working with you, I've at least seen a huge difference. And then I also take time, take a pause and take a breath, change my physical posture, right? To trigger a different way of thinking in my brain and to cut off that emotional state.
Fascinating. I love that. I love how practical and tactical these things are. We often say the difference between a reaction and a response is huge. So it's so great. Thank you. Final thoughts before I hand over the workshop to Renee. Kirsten.
Oh, I think, I would just like to encourage everyone to embark on this journey if you haven't yet. I think, success in this work means that we're living our best selves, we're reducing the aspects of ourselves that are our own limiting factors. And in my own experience, as I've removed these blocks, I have felt an amazing amount of freedom in that. I've also found it can be really, really helpful to have an accountability partner in this work. And that could be a coach, a mentor, a professional like Dr. St. Jacques. It could also be a partner or a friend, anyone who can really be helpful and encourage you and hold you accountable to staying on this journey will really help the process move forward, and also provide some consistency in the practices that you're developing along the way.
I love that. I know a group of women who are accountability partners, and they call themselves proppers, not because they're proper, but because they prop each other up. Pruitt, over to you.
I love that. I might actually steal that. Proppers. I love it. I again agree with what Kristen is saying, and I think having the knowledge of your shadow behaviors, it really is a tool, right? It's a gift. It's not something to walk away from. It's not something to be scared of. It's not a right versus wrong. There isn't a need to hold on to the past and what you could have done differently. It's to have the information so that you can better engage and respond, right? So the reflection is about creating opportunities rather than regrets. And I'm excited for the workshop that you're going to go into with Renee St. Jacques. It's going to be great. There's also another offer. I mentioned the print survey from the Paul Hertz group, and we do have an offer from them. We'll bring it up on the screen in just a minute, but they're offering about a 66% discount for Women in Cloud members to take that print survey. And in fact, you're going to get more in terms of the report than what I did working with my coach. So you will get your print survey, the Why of You report. It's going to have your trigger report. And you saw an excerpt of mine. And then there's going to be an interesting role alignment report and an interpretive video to help you understand what your shadow behaviors and best self, how they may actually appear. And this just helps to deepen the impact and usefulness of the knowledge that comes from this. So you'll see this here on the slide. You'll see a complete link down at the bottom. But I would encourage everyone to do that. And then again, Renee is going to walk you through some incredible information on how to be adaptable and to step forward with emotional intelligence.
So great. Thank you, Pruitt. This is the why of you from this report. So that's awesome that they're offering that opportunity for Women in Cloud. And truly, I thank you. I thank all of you for sharing your personal experience, and any tool that can help my awareness and cultivate and foster that the ability to recognize the shadow behaviors when they show up is really appreciated. Okay, now we get to hear from Renee. I hand it over to you. Thank you very much. We really look forward. We're so happy you're back. We look forward to hearing your share.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Pruitt, for all those insights and for sharing your story, because that's what really makes it real for us. I wanted to welcome everybody to the workshop portion of this hour. We are going to talk about your mindset and give you some really practical tools for how this can show up for you that just builds upon all the great things that we just talked about. So during this time, I want to just remind us that we cannot move from inspiration to action without really addressing those psychological and relational barriers that may be holding us back. So as we go into this, I have a great worksheet that will really help us as we really make this real for ourselves. So I've got this QR code that I just want to encourage everybody, if you got your phone, pull that up and you can follow along. The invite should also have the worksheet as well. So we're happy to get that to you, but that will help you as you walk through this and really make this real for you. So I want to start off with an understanding around emotional intelligence, though, because at the heart of it, I believe that emotional intelligence can change the world. What do I mean by that? If you just consider for a moment some of the most formative experiences of your life, sometimes they are very painful, such as a divorce or abuse or some kind of trauma of some sort. We all have them in our story. But if you consider some of the key players in that formative experience, you will realize that that particular person's emotional intelligence may not be the highest. And oh, how different things would have been if so. If that person had the ability to perceive and understand and to manage their emotions and to be able to judiciously and empathetically be in a relationship with you, a lot of that mistreatment and that toxicity wouldn't have happened. And so I just really envision a healthier, kinder place, not just in our homes, but also in our work. What would that look like? Can you imagine a workplace without siloed work, with people being open to feedback, people not backbiting or trying to take credit for each other's work? What would it truly look like for us to be emotionally intelligent in the workplace? And so as I think about this, the roadmap to this, there's 3 practical areas that I want to consider as we elevate our self-awareness and our emotional intelligence. And the first one is around minding your mindset, right? What are the thoughts? The power of thoughts. The second is the power of feelings. And the third one is the power of validation, which is really my secret to success when it comes to conflict resolution. By the way, and many things that I do in the background when it comes to the home life is I actually do couple counseling at times, and I'm trained as a couple therapist. And so, wow, I know what it's like to deal with conflict, right? Because that's sometimes one of the biggest areas that it shows up. So even more so in the workplace. So let's deep dive into this. But first off, I want a reflection from every one of us. Let's just have a little conversation with ourselves. What is one behavior that you engage in that you know is not at your highest? You are not in your highest and best. You are not operating in the leader that you want to be. What behavior? Maybe it's apologizing or overly apologizing. Maybe it's becoming small. Maybe it's not negotiating your salary increase when you know you deserve it. What does that look like? Maybe it's the imposter syndrome. And secondly, is there a relational dynamic at home, in your personal life, or in your workplace that you know is a stressor for you? That if you can optimize and overcome that, that would really, really help you so much to be successful and to be thriving. So let's take a moment to ground ourselves. And I'm sure whatever pops up as I talk here is what you really should be focused on. So don't overthink it. Now, the first pillar is the power of thoughts. So as I had mentioned, we've mentioned this multiple times around minding your mindset. The key here is that if we change the way we think, we will change the way we feel, how we act, how we behave, how we live, and how we show up at home and at work. And so when we think about the power of thoughts, that is really what's driving so much of the behavior that we have. And I love what Dr. Brene Brown says. She asks, what is the story we tell ourselves? Because many times it's some kind of narrative that we've constructed about a situation, about a person, about ourselves that is flawed in some way, that really is underneath why we behave the way we do. And so I want to encourage everybody to consider that. When you think about the behavior that we just reflected on, when you think about the area that a relational dynamic, that what's the story you tell yourself? And oftentimes what I see is we either fortune tell or we mind read. That is, it's based on cognitive behavioral therapy. We tend to do certain things as human beings, and we tend to do what's called cognitive distortions. We tend to distort things. It's kind of half true, so it feels true, but it's actually not fully true. And so oftentimes you have a gut feel about something, and we will kind of forecast and future tell that and fortune tell that it's going to be bad. That let's say that I did a presentation at work and I tell myself that was terrible. I totally messed up on this area, or this got shuffled, or this was not what I planned. And so I fortune tell that I'm not going to get promoted. So all of a sudden I become a fortune teller, which by the way, I'm not, and most of you are not, that something bad is going to happen. And so guess what? That doesn't help me. I start acting more small. I start acting more insecure. And so the other thing that we do a lot is we mind read. So back to that example, I bombed on a presentation, or I think I did. And so I think my manager is not pleased with me, that she doesn't want to promote me or put me up for promotion, whatever that might be. And so all of a sudden I'm telling myself stories about what she thinks, what other people think. I'm really telling stories about what the future holds. And that really limits my success, because again, if we change the way we think, we change the way we feel, we act, we behave, we live, we show up. So it's so interesting though, if you double click on that even more, what's at the base of all of that is shame. So I look, again, Dr. Brene Brown, who's a resilience and shame researcher, she talks about the difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is, I did something wrong. Shame is, I am wrong. Who I am is wrong, flawed, and bad. And so if we even go deeper, let's say with that presentation example, I have shame. I have shame about who I am. I have shame about what value I bring to this workplace. And so if I can just examine that, we're not even trying to change it or rationalize it away, but we're going to see it for what it is, for the root issue, and not try to just do positive vibes only. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but really to see what that is, that actually starts dismantling it, because shame can't survive when it's being exposed. It kind of festers in the dark when we are not really aware of it. And so that's really why self-awareness is so key. It skews, when we have shame, it skews how we show up. So back to that reflection in the beginning. What's the story that we tell ourselves when it comes to that habit, that comes to the relational dynamic that we have? What is the story you tell yourself? Now, let's move into the second pillar, which is the power feelings. So feelings and thoughts are kind of two sides of a coin. If I think a certain way, I think I'm not worthy, I think I'm not enough, I think that people are thinking that I'm less than, and who am I to even be sitting at this table, and who am I to even have an opinion, and imposter syndrome. The way I feel obviously is going to be anxiety, insecurity, maybe even depression. It's the story we tell ourselves that really, really creates all those feelings that accompany, just naturally so. If I'm having that broken record over and over again, I'm going to have those feelings. Now, let's talk about feelings. Feelings have a bad rap, especially when you think about how we grew up. If I did a poll of everybody who's watching this, and I asked you, did you grow up in a home where feelings were valued and validated? I bet you anything, the majority of you will say, I grew up in a home that did not validate feelings. It was, go into your room, Johnny, and don't come out unless you have a smile on your face. Don't cry. Crying is for wimps. Don't, all these things, these messages, turn off the tears. One person even said that to my kid once in daycare, and I was like, oh my goodness, I've got to address this. This is not a good message to give kids. Do you know why? Because feelings is a signal to us. If you look at the brain, it's a signal that that something may be wrong or off. And they're really, really key to us. So when you look at, let's say, a toddler, how many of you have a toddler at home? You know that they express their feelings with their whole body. They got big feelings. And oftentimes we will even tell a child, let's say they bump their knee or whatever, and they'll say, "You're okay." They're not okay. They're crying. And so I think we have a lot to learn from toddlers, in that we have big feelings. And by the way, adults have tantrums too. We don't act high EQ all the time, right? So we have tantrums as well. But the difference between a toddler and an adult, what should be the difference, is that we have the ability to regulate our emotions. We have what's called the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational side of our brain that's fully developed, that is not fully developed in a toddler. And so a toddler actually needs a lot of our help as adults to manage their emotions, to put words to their feelings. So my 3-year-old, almost 3-year-old, and almost 5-year-old, they've been naming their emotions since they could start speaking. They knew it before their alphabets, what they felt, whether it's jealousy or whether it's anger or fear. And it's just miraculous. As soon as I get them to name their emotion, they feel validated, and all of a sudden they start recruiting the prefrontal cortex, which is that rational side, and they feel better. And it's the same thing with us. So when you think about it, let's move into the next slide here. When you think about the feelings that you have about that behavior, about that relational dynamic that you have, what are the feelings that come up? And I bet you, if you can just name it, these feelings are indicators of, it's basically data. They're not directives. We don't have to act according to them, but we can feel better just by feeling validated and be like, yeah, this is what it is. Let me pinpoint what it is. Oftentimes people say, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, or stress. That's a pile of emotions. What's underneath that? Let's go to the next slide here. There are so many emotions. There's hundreds of emotions that we can pick from. And these are some of the basic ones. But if you just Google a feeling word list and you pull that up and you put it on your fridge, it's going to be fascinating for you to just check in with yourself on a regular basis. Name 5 emotions. Just challenge yourself. What are 5 emotions? And you start recruiting that prefrontal cortex. You start feeling better. And guess what? You get to know your needs. So when you know what you feel, you know what you need. So the third pillar, so when I talk to people about conflict resolution, courageous conversations, D&I situations, sticky situations with boundaries, leading peers, delegation, all these nuances, I always tell them my secret is the power of validation. So we talked about it earlier with Kristen and with Pruitt, but that is so key. So let's see this difference here. I have a image here that shows you 2 things. On the left-hand side, empathetic listening. And then on the right-hand side, dismissive listening. Does that look familiar to you? Many times we are so anxious about what is going on with the other person. We want them to be okay because we want to be okay. So it's not about them, it's about us. And so we are constantly being like, oh, silver lining, silver lining, silver lining. On the bright side, and we always move them so quickly out of their grief and out of their pain. We don't know what it's like to just sit in it and just to hear, even if they're sharing about us, about an offense they have with us, and we don't even agree. We don't think it's our fault. What does it look like for us to have empathetic listening? So there's a lot of myths that really hinder us from validating, from just saying, hey, impact and intention are 100% different. I realize that I have had a negative impact on you, and I want to own that. Despite my intentions, I want to own that. So that's a little different than apologizing, which can kind of be like, I want to get out of the limelight ASAP because I've shame. And so I'm just going to say, sorry. You know how kids do that. They'll just say, sorry, and they'll want you to move on really quickly. It's so different when we can just sit in that and say, I validate that. And some of the myths that come up is that we feel like, oh, that's giving in. Well, I don't agree with them. Why would I validate them? I don't want to say that they're right. I don't want to really show any weakness or empathy in the workplace. And I just want to tell you that is the opposite of weakness. That is the humility and the strength of a leader, is if you can own your impact on other people, despite whether or not you agree with them or not. So think about it. Let's reflect back to the initial reflection and grounding exercise. What would it look like for you to truly listen, truly empathetically listen, and validate the lived experience of the other person? Guess what? If you do that, they're going to be more likely to do the same thing to you and to hear your side of the story as well. So, well, that wraps up our crash course on Mind Your Mindset and some of my top tips when it comes to emotional intelligence skills. I want to leave you with this leave behind, which is basically a guide to emotional intelligence in the workplace. I've got my top 10 tips. I've got some reading for you. So definitely sign up. I've got the URL here. It's lions-tigers.com/women-in-cloud. And then I've got the QR code as well for that worksheet that I referenced for this workshop. So I'll turn that over to you, Nancy. Thank you so much.
That was amazing. So much information, so much wisdom packed in 15 minutes in like the prettiest slides too, may I say. I do. I loved it. I loved how you came back to, okay, now, what's showing up for you at work, or what behavior is showing up for you at work and in your relationship. And then you came back with what story am I telling myself about that? And the cognitive distortions, the catastrophizing, the fortune telling. I'm humbled by, you got me with that. It's true. We've got some questions that I've had sent to me directly, if you don't mind. I'd love to. Okay. How do I deal with someone who doesn't have the same level of emotional intelligence that I do? So maybe you can carry on with how to validate that person, or please expand.
Yeah, I just want to encourage people to not expect water from a desert. There's going to be people who have never even heard of this topic. They've never heard of emotional intelligence. They certainly are not getting this training. And so the key here is it's your responsibility to act high EQ and always take the higher road. So I've had scenarios even with family where they're not acting high EQ at all. They're not validating my experience. All they can see is themselves, not their own behavior and how it's impacted me. You know what? I just have to humble myself and say, let me own it for them. And eventually that will soften up the relationship enough for me to bring up, hey, I was hurt too. And I want to share that. And so, but we can't expect water from a desert. So if you need to go to counseling to process that is going to probably be better than trying to always try to process or fully get that restoration from the person. But you can do your part. You can do your part.
So great. And then the other question that came in, I always thought that my feelings, please expand on your feelings first and how they transform our thoughts, or thoughts transforming our feelings.
Yeah,
so
it's a
requested.
That there are many theories in psychology. If you look at the history of psychology and different psychologists who've had different theories, is it bodily reactions first that impact our somatic first, and then we have feelings and thoughts, or is it thoughts first to feelings? And it's pretty tied. I think sometimes there are times where we feel something and it triggers maybe, let's say, jealousy or insecurity, and we don't even know what the story is. Maybe there is no story yet. But there's times where it very much is this ingrained story, sometimes even from childhood, about our worth and about how we should show up in conflict. Like, let's say, avoid, or let's say be a controller. These are things we kind of learn sometimes in the way we're brought up. And then it's that story we tell ourselves about our worth that then pulls up the feelings. So I either way, whether the feeling wordless or the story we tell ourselves, I tend to do either or. I don't really favor one or the other. It's just, I kind of do both, actually, when I'm analyzing my thoughts and feelings and I'm struggling with something.
Well, that makes sense. They're so interwoven. They're deeply interconnected.
Two sides of the coin.
Right? The limbic system is so much older than the cognitive mind. They have to, have influence. And I love that you quote Brene Brown. Her work is so interesting, and shame and courage and vulnerability. And I like how you differentiated between guilt and shame. I'd love to invite Kristen and Pruitt back as well, as we we wrap up and offer other thoughts and contributions. We're really I am so grateful to you all. And I don't know. Sometimes I think, my friends, that I might have more than one shadow behavior. Of course I do, but it's like having 5 garbage cans and only 4 lids. And it is a management, right? And I think that the beauty of having the courage to tackle this, and for you to share your experience too, evolves us as women and entrepreneurs and mothers and sisters and daughters and neighbors and humans, and we can help elevate others. Any parting thoughts from anyone, please?
Kristen, do you want to go first?
Oh, I would just like to say thank you, Nancy, for being our fearless moderator. You did a great job. And thanks so much for the workshop, Renee and Pruitt, for all of the very tangible tips and insights. So I learned a lot myself listening, and really appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, I have to say the same. Listening to Kristen, and then with Renee's workshop, it is informative. And for the women who are attending the session, and also the men who are attending, you're already on this path of understanding yourself and challenging yourself to continue to grow, but also like in a community that helps to support and challenge others in a positive way. So this is a first step. It's not the last step. There are many more, but it is a very exciting path. And so, I just want to call out the fact that you do have a community that you can lean on. And I want to thank Women in Cloud and Renee, Nancy, and Kristen, for the opportunity to be here. And I would challenge you to also think, as you explore your emotional intelligence and shadow behaviors, to also step forward with some space of grace, acceptance, and forgiveness for yourself. That's really important, to let go of what was and just look to what can be. And that's more impactful, and that's more important for you. So that's what I would wrap with.
How beautiful is that? Acceptance, grace, and space. May we be kind and patient. That's so lovely. And that's got to be emotional intelligence too. Yes, Dr. St. Jacques?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm just going to hearken everybody else's, just what everybody else said. It's such an honor to be here. And thank you, Women in Cloud, for prioritizing this topic. I mean, not a lot of conferences do, because they don't think it's relevant. It's totally relevant. We cannot be what we need to be if we don't look at ourselves, if we don't have the self-awareness, we don't have the tools, because most of us didn't grow up with those. And so I love what you said, Pruitt, about just leaning into that, but also leaning in with grace for ourselves. I think all of us, I mean, even I'm sure from the stories from Kristen, from Pruitt, we grew by facing the discomfort. We grew. We would never be where we are, and I'm sure we'll just continue to grow if we didn't lean into the discomfort and show ourselves that we don't have to feel shame about our deficits. We can embrace it. It could be a strength. So thank you so much.
Great. Indeed, having that ability to do the work, and do the work in this community. Women in Cloud, they are building a lot of things. They're networking and venture capital and everything, but there is power in community, and having the ability to share that vulnerability and courage with each other, with grace, space, and acceptance, is a powerful thing. And I started this talking about saying, yes, I'll do shadow behaviors. That's the jackpot workshop in this. It is powerful. And I offer my gratitude to you and your wisdom, Renee. Thank you so much. Your powerful personal experience. I need to please acknowledge our sponsors as well. If we could have that slide, because nothing happens here without their support, and we're grateful to them too. I think people know where to follow up with you if they have further questions, and Again, my thanks to Women in Cloud for their courage of handling everything that goes on in the life of women in technology and in the life of women in womanhood.
Yeah.
Thanks to you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.